You reach a point you never announce to anyone. It arrives quietly, like a lamp dimming in a room you've walked through for years. You don't collapse. You don't make a scene. You just feel the light inside you thinning, the way evening thins a long day. It happens after another late-night call, the kind you always answer, even when your voice is barely there. You sit in the dark kitchen with the phone pressed to your ear, listening to someone else's storm while your own weather gathers behind your ribs. You say the right words, because that's what you've always done. And when the call ends, when the house is silent again, you hear the soft click inside you, the sound of a door closing a little more than before. Fatigue doesn't shout. It settles. It settles into your shoulders, your breath, the pause before you rise from a chair. You move through the rooms of your life the way someone moves through a house they're still paying for, but no longer truly live in. You know this place. You've stood at the sink long after the dishes were done, hands resting on the cool porcelain, feeling something leaking out of you. A slow pour, barely noticeable at first, until one day you realize the container is nearly empty. Not because life has been cruel, but because you've been pouring without noticing how deep the well needed to be. There is a particular silence that follows years of being the reliable one. Not a peaceful silence, a hollow one. A silence that comes after you've given your time, your steadiness, your listening, your careful patience to everyone who asked and many who never did. A silence that feels like standing in a hallway after the guests have left, holding a coat you forgot was yours. And in that hallway, in that dim light, something in you finally whispers what you've avoided hearing. You have been carrying too much, not out of heroism, not out of pride, but out of a habit that began so long ago, you forgot it was a choice. You kept opening your hands, letting your own warmth drift out, believing the world would return it in some quiet, balancing way. But tonight, in this kitchen, in this stillness, in this body that has done its best, you feel the truth settle like dusk along the horizon. The weight you carry has begun to carry you. There is a pattern we rarely name, though we feel it every time our chest tightens before we answer someone else's need. It begins long before adulthood. Somewhere in the past, maybe in a childhood kitchen, maybe in a quiet room where someone sighed heavily, you learned that love arrives when you are useful. You learned that being good means disappearing just enough for others to feel comfortable. And so we grow into adults who overgive without ever calling it that. We call it kindness, loyalty, generosity. But beneath the surface there is an invisible contract. If I keep giving, I will not be forgotten. You don't think this consciously. It hums underneath your actions, the way a refrigerator hums in the night, steady, unnoticed, shaping everything. There's a moment you might remember. You called someone you cared about, not to help them, not to fix anything, just to hear a voice on the other end. And the phone rang and rang and rang. You told yourself it didn't matter, that they were busy. But what you felt was the truth. You didn't know how to ask for anything. You only knew how to offer. Or another moment, more ordinary, but it stays with you. You walked into a room where a friend said, "I'm fine," even though their eyes were heavy. And before you could stop yourself, you stepped in. You rearranged your day, your time, your inner balance. You became the solution to a problem they hadn't even spoken aloud. And afterward, you sat in your car feeling strangely empty, as if you'd traded something you couldn't name for a gratitude that never came. We all do this when we believe that being needed is the safest way to be loved. We overextend, overreach, overlisten. We try to become the softest place for others to land so they never see how hard the ground feels beneath our own feet. This isn't weakness, it's an old misunderstanding, the belief that goodness is measured by how small you make yourself beside someone else's expectations, the belief that saying "I'm tired" is the same as saying "I don't care," the belief that stepping back means disappearing, and slowly, quietly, the guilt of wanting anything for yourself begins to dissolve into something gentler, a recognition that feels almost like truth. You give too much when you fear you won't be held at all. There comes a moment, not dramatic, not loud, when the shape of your kindness suddenly reveals its hidden cost. You're sitting alone, maybe in the car before walking into the house, maybe on the edge of your bed with the day still clinging to you, and you feel it, a thin, undeniable tremor of truth. Something in you has been wearing down, and you can no longer pretend it's just being tired. It is the moment when the room you've always kept open for everyone else begins to feel cold. When you realize the door has stayed unlocked not from generosity, but from fear. Fear that if you closed it even once, no one would try the handle again. You've been the open doorway for so long that you forgot what it felt like to stand on your own side of it. And here, in this quiet clarity, you see the paradox. What you've called kindness has slowly required the disappearance of the one offering it. You remember how often your hands reached out on instinct, steadying, soothing, fixing. Hands that were always warm for others, even when the rest of you was fading. Hands that grew lighter over the years, as if something essential was being carried away each time you said, "Of course," each time you stretched a little farther than you had to. It's like watching a tree whose branches lean so far toward every hungry creature that the trunk begins to split. Not from malice, not from weakness, but from too much bending. Even the strongest wood cracks when it tries to offer itself to every wandering mouth. This is the realization that shakes you awake. That goodness without boundaries isn't goodness at all. It becomes a hollowing, a slow surrender of the self in the name of being useful. You see it in the rooms you've walked through, the air always a bit thin because you left your breath for someone else to take. You see it in the nights when sleep would not come, because you were holding the weight of lives that were never yours to carry. You see it in the mirror, in the softened slump of your shoulders, in the tired kindness around your eyes, the kind that asks for nothing because it forgot how. And the sadness of this truth arrives at the same moment as its relief. A softness spreads through you when you understand. You were never meant to disappear so others could stand tall. Your light was not made to burn at every corner until nothing remained at the center. There is a stillness now, a simple, steady knowing. Kindness without a self is only a shadow. There comes a day when you stop announcing your limits, not out of rebellion, not out of bitterness, but because the strain of over-explaining has worn itself out in you. You simply grow quiet in the places where you once rushed in. You let the phone vibrate on the table without reaching for it. The world still moves, but you no longer move with every tug. This is not withdrawal. It is the beginning of a threshold, the kind a house forms naturally when evening settles, when doors close gently against the night. There is no anger in it, only the soft clarity of knowing which rooms belong to you. You start to feel the dignity of distance, how stepping back isn't a performance, but a return, how silence can hold the shape of your truth far better than any argument. There is a power in not responding, a quiet, steady power that doesn't rise to defend itself because it does not feel accused. You notice it in small moments first. You read a message and feel no urgency to absorb its weight. You hear the familiar tone of someone asking for more than they give. and you feel the old reflex rise, then pause, then dissolve. The space between their need and your response widens, like a slow breath that finally reaches the bottom of your lungs. Boundaries don't feel like fences anymore. They feel like doorways with the door gently, respectfully closed. Not locked, just not open to everyone at every hour. And strangely, this refusal, this quiet refusal, carries a tenderness of its own. You are not punishing anyone. You are simply choosing not to abandon yourself for them. You walk away without explanation, because peace requires fewer words than people think. Absence becomes its own language, saying, "I will not harm myself to keep you comfortable." There's a moment in the house, maybe in the late afternoon, when the wind moves the curtains just slightly. You hear the soft rustle, the faint shifting of light, and something in you knows. This is what it feels like to belong to yourself again. The room exhales, and the house quiets. There is a silence that doesn't push anyone away. It settles the way evening light settles in a familiar room, gently, evenly, without demanding attention. You find yourself drawn to that kind of silence now, not because you're hiding, but because something in you has begun to understand the nature of peace. Imagine your life as a house, not the kind people visit for entertainment, but a quiet home set a little back from the road, a place with soft floors and warm corners where your breath feels unhurried. This house isn't closed to the world. The door is still there. The porch light still glows. But you no longer fling the door open at every knock. You step to the threshold, listen, and decide with care. This isn't coldness. It's reverence, for your own space, and for the people you love enough not to invite them into your exhaustion. There are mornings when the light enters your rooms in thin, steady lines. You watch how it touches the table, how it rests on the walls without forcing anything. The light doesn't chase. It arrives, and in arriving, it teaches you something. Connection that does not disturb, presence that does not demand. Your silence begins to feel like that light, a quiet blessing, a simple way of saying, "I am here, but I am whole, and I want you to be whole too." Distance no longer feels like separation. It feels like standing on your own riverbank, letting the water pass between you and another, without trying to control its flow. You can love someone from your side of the river. You can wish them well without stepping into waters that always pulled you under. And when they call, not every day, not with urgency, but with sincerity, you meet them at the threshold of your house. You speak softly. You give only what you can give without dimming the light inside you. And somehow the connection becomes clearer, cleaner, kinder. Because silence, offered from a steady place, is not the absence of love. It is love choosing not to harm itself. Sometimes the kindest touch is made of distance. There is a moment, somewhere near the end of all this untangling, when you stop reaching for reasons. Not because you've run out of them, but because you finally understand that peace does not argue for itself. It simply arrives, like a soft wind through an open window, and you feel your shoulders drop without meaning to. You remember the years of carrying everyone, the long nights of being needed, the quiet mornings when you held too much, the habit of giving until something inside you flickered. Fatigue was the first doorway. Clarity was the second. Now you stand at the third, the doorway of release, and for once you don't rush through it. You pause, you breathe, you let the air settle around you. You notice how different the world feels when you are not trying to manage its weight. You walk through your rooms with a lighter step. You let the phone rest where it is. You watch the afternoon light stretch across the floor and realize that nothing in this moment demands more from you than your presence. You have stopped defending the quiet inside you, stopped explaining your distance, stopped apologizing for boundaries that were never meant to be optional. Something in you has loosened. The old knot of guilt, the old belief that goodness requires sacrifice, the old fear that stepping back means losing love. But you haven't lost anything. You have returned to yourself, slowly, gently, like water finding its own level again. And in returning, you discover a truth you were too exhausted to see before. Love does not grow where you are disappearing. It grows where you are present, steady, whole. You feel it now, that clean, spacious emptiness that isn't loneliness, isn't withdrawal, isn't coldness. It's the space that forms when you stop gripping the world with tired hands, the spaciousness that lets life move again, without pushing through you to get where it's going. No one taught you how to let go without drama. You learned it by surviving your own tenderness. And now release feels less like an ending and more like a homecoming, a quiet step back into the center of yourself. You do not need to justify your peace. You do not need to earn your breath. Letting go is how you finally hold yourself.